right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. So we'll go ahead and get started now and keep letting people in. Before we do, my name is Michaela. I work at Children's Bureau in the APSS program. So welcome all of you to the first part of our 4-part training series in collaboration with Pact and Adoption Alliance. So Pact is a wonderful nonprofit organization whose mission is to serve adopted children of color. They provide services such as placement, consultation, education, support, and community for adoptees and their parents on issues of adoption and race. So just a couple of things before I introduce our trainer. I just want to remind everyone that we'll be sending an email in the next couple of days with a sign-in sheet for you to fill out. Please, when you get that email from Erica, just take a minute to sign your name. Once you send that to us, then we'll send you the certificate of participation as well as a recording of this training. So make sure you don't miss that. And then lastly, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Feel free to reach out to Erica, who you received or who you RSVP'd with. Okay, so now I will introduce our amazing presenters this morning. First, we have, her name is Katie Wynen. She's a transracial international Colombian adoptee with a master's in social work. Katie has worked with members of the adoption triad since 2006. She studied under Dr. Joyce McGuire-Pavio in Boston before she moved to California and joined the Pact team. At Pact, she works in adoption placement, leads groups, and provides adoption education nationwide. Katie is also an Angels in Adoption 2019 recipient from the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute. So welcome, Katie. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We're so excited for what you have in store for us. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to you now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm not the main presenter today. My panelists are the actual experts, and they are going to introduce themselves when we get started. I'm about to share my screen. And I personally like to make it super big, so just minimize where you need to minimize. All right. So today we are listening to adopted people of color about what is needed to serve them. And when I was working on this presentation, I was like, oh, my panelists are not going to get a specific thing that says, there will be some moments where they say, this is what I needed. This is what would have really helped. What I'm hoping that you take away from this training and this experience is just hearing from their lived experience and getting a sense of, oh, this is what they need, or this is what they were talking about. Like I said, there will be points and times where they say, this is what I needed, but we're also hoping that you just listen and really take in what is being shared by all of these incredible humans. So too often the adoptee perspective is subordinated to that of the adoptive parent or the adoption professional. I do want to say, I did not mean to put professional in quotes, and I totally forgot to fix this morning, but where I'm coming from this is a lot of people want to see letters after somebody's last name. But when you have lived experience, in Pact's opinion, that person is a professional in the experience of adoption, understanding it from a lens that even somebody who's done all these trainings but is not directly connected to, these people are professionals and experts. We believe that adults with firsthand experience are the truest experts on this experience. So I'm going to have my experts introduce themselves. You will see the order I would like you to go in and the prompts on the right. So start with Alice, and just make sure you're unmuted, please.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name's Alice Taylor, she, her. I identify as Black. And I was 5, almost 6 when I entered the system, and I was 8 when I was legally adopted.
Thank you. Joshua. Unmute. Joshua, you're muted.
I swear that keeps going back and forth. Name's Joshua McCarthy. Pronouns he, his. Racial identity, biracial. I entered the system when I was 4 years old, and then I was adopted at the age of 12.
Serena.
Hi, everyone. My name is Serena Madrigal. My pronouns are she, her. Racial identity, identify as Latina, Mexican American. I was 9 months old when I entered the system, and I was 12 when I was adopted. It was reunification with my bio family, actually.
Great. So all of my panelists today were ultimately adopted, but as you heard, all of them entered into the foster care system and were adopted at older ages, which I thought and feel would be really helpful for the attendees today to hear about. They will get more into their story as we go into our questions. Just a few announcements, caveats. When I run panels, I tell my panelists to not hold back, to just say what they want to say, let it all out, speak their truth. This is also a huge ask for these three individuals to be on screen with a bunch of faces watching them. So just being respectful of what they're sharing. To my panelists, if at any point you need to turn your screen off because it's life and you're sharing some deep truths, please do so. Most important thing is to take care of yourself. They don't have to answer any questions that they don't want to. I will have time for questions throughout. And they don't have to answer anything that also I ask them. Majority of the questions on the screen they have already seen. There are a few that I have thrown in. So we'll see how we do. Starting with foster care and entering the system. So for Alice, Joshua, and Serena, the way I usually flow is when the spirit moves you, whoever wants to share first, please do. I have 3 questions up on the screen. Why were you placed in the foster care system? Did you enter alone or with a sibling or siblings? And do you know if any extended family was contacted to take placement of you? You can answer all 3 or just one, and whoever would like to go first.
Hi, everybody. I will start. So I was placed in the foster care system with siblings, 4 total. So I was the second to youngest. Let me back up. There was 5 of us. The oldest was already 18, so she was already legally an adult. And then there were 4 of us between the ages of 12 and infant. We went to a shelter, and then I ended up going into foster care. I was able to go in with my youngest sibling, so the infant, which was great. And I was placed in the foster care system due to my bio mother's drug addiction and mental health issues. And I do know that extended family was contacted at some point. I'm not sure when, but they were contacted at some point during the time that I was in the child welfare system. And yeah, obviously that didn't happen.
Joshua or Serena?
I'll go. I was placed in the foster care system. Ultimately, my mother couldn't take care of me. So she decided that she no longer could care for me and my sister. That goes into the second question. I was placed by myself into the system for a year, and then a year later, my sister then was entered into the system as well. Do I know if any extended family was contacted? I don't know. My biological father said he was contacted eventually. We don't know like the time frame. I just found that out probably a few years ago, but I don't know the details of that contact. So
Thank you. Serena?
I was placed in foster care because both of my parents, they actually had an ongoing case. So we were put in and out of foster care, and then ultimately they decided that my parents weren't fit to take care of us. They were in and out of jail and on drugs as well. So we were like officially placed. I'm one of 7, but my older 3 siblings have a different father, so they were able to go with that side of the family. And then I was placed with 3 other siblings. We were placed together at first. We were in the system for about 12 years, so they couldn't really keep all 4 of us together. So we were separated years at a time sometimes. So that, and then I honestly don't think extended family was contacted. It's kind of hard to say because I was so little, and now when the conversation of foster care comes up, it gets kind of like avoided. So I'm not really sure if family was contacted, but yeah.
Thank you. There, you'll see that some of this will come back up. So if you're like, oh, I wanted to hear more about that, it'll likely come up in the next round of questions as well. Placements. Again, same style, whoever wants to go first. How many placements did you have before you were placed with your adoptive family? Were they with your siblings? And strengths and challenges of the placements you had. And these do go a little more in depth, so please take your time.
Start. I saw this question like this week about how many placements, and I tried to like figure it out. It's way too many. I like to say it's almost close to like double digits. I know I had at least 2 failed adoptions, which are crushing for me and my sister, or whatever. Those things kind of come up as well. Fortunately, I was always placed with my sister, except for probably from what I remember, maybe there was 1 year where I wasn't. Right before I was adopted, I was put in a group home. And then my sister was still in foster care. So that was for a year. And then we were fortunately adopted. Actually, now I'm bringing it up. There's at least 2. It's, to be honest, it's a blur. Being placed with my sister, I mean, there's the benefit of just having at least one person with you, a rock and anchor for one another, just feeding off one another, positive and negative, in several ways. Strengths and challenges of the placements. I like how you worded that. Strengths, like I said, at least having the benefit of being able to be with my sister for several of those is probably just the biggest strength. Challenges, I mean, all of them were challenges. They're all for the most part, were all temporary. You never know. You're not really able to create relationships, whether it be with your teachers, with playmates, your classmates and stuff like that, and maybe even the siblings you live with. You can try to, but being through so many different placements, it's like you get to one and you're like, man, I could be gone tomorrow. So really, what's the point on really trying to build these type of relationships? And I think that was probably the biggest thing, this habitual behavior of not creating relationships in some of the most important years of my life, me and my sister. And I can easily say that those things still are here today as an adult, years after the system. Creating relationships is probably like, I'm good at it, but at the same time, I'm not. It's something I recognize in certain degrees. So, yeah.
May I ask, did your sister have as many placements as you did? If you know.
I would like to say yes, because the majority of them we were together. It was probably just again that 1 year. I don't know if she was in the same house, the same placement for that 1 year before we were adopted. The other one that I can remember, I'm not too sure. I would say, if anything, she probably had just as many as me, maybe more, just because I know I had stability for 1 year with the group home. I don't know what her story is. It's not something we talk about, actually. Now that you sit here and ask that question, I'm like, man, I don't even know. To be honest, I'm talking for my sister. I couldn't even answer that for you.
Cool. Serena or Alice? Any or all that you want to answer?
Yes. I feel like a lot of my answers will be very similar to Josh's, but I will go ahead and say them. I've tried to count how many placements I've had. I've gotten up to 18, but then again, I don't fully know because I was younger when I was placed. I was only 9 months, so there is like a lot of years that I can't really recollect. But I've actually tried to locate my file to kind of get a better understanding of where I was during that time, like what was happening. Like I mentioned before, we were all placed together in the beginning, but it was really hard to keep us all together. We kind of all had our own things going on, our own needs and everything, so we were separated. That would have probably been a strength, is to actually be placed with my siblings, even if it was one consecutively. Just I felt like there could have been more. I don't know. I think it could have been more like a priority as far as like placement went to have us be together. But I often felt that my social worker would put it on us that we couldn't stay together because of what was going on with us. So I would say that was a challenge for sure. Foster care was kind of all I really knew, so I didn't really. Now, of course, as an adult, I can reflect and understand this, but when I was a child, all I knew was foster care, so I couldn't think of prior, or I couldn't think of anything besides being in foster care. Like that was my life. That's what I was used to. I was used to kind of the bouncing around, the inconsistencies. Now as an adult, I definitely feel the challenges that that's brought on myself and the things that I've had to kind of overcome and work through because of that. So I feel like definitely some of the challenges and the strengths like bleed into my life now, which is, it's bittersweet, but it is what it is. So yeah.
Thank you. Alice, if you have anything.
Yeah, so as far as how many placements, I consider when I was placed in the shelter as a placement because it was temporary and I remember it. So with that, it would be 2, the shelter and then foster care. I was always placed with my younger brother, who was a baby at the time, but I was never placed with my 2 older siblings, and they would have been around 7 and 11 or 12 at the time. As far as being placed with my younger brother, of course, that was great. I had some sort of attachment to my bio family, so I was, happy about that. Strengths and challenges. A strength in my particular case with my foster family was that there were other foster kids there. As weird as that sounds, I felt, and they were a little bit older than me, so I just felt like I wasn't alone, that they could relate, that it wasn't their bio family either. So I didn't feel like, certain kids were being looked after more than I was or anything like that. I felt like we were treated fairly equal as far as I can recall. Challenges of the placements, I would say, is just the fact that I was in foster care was a challenge. I knew that that wasn't going to be a temporary option. I was still able to see my bio mom and my sister, and so that was really hard, seeing them and then not being with them and going back to the foster family. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Social workers and the individuals you worked with during your time in the system. And then, I don't work within foster adoption. I work in infant placement adoption. And I know once I'm done with post-placement visits and everything, I step out of the picture. But all of you had time before your adoption was finalized. So do you remember how many social workers you possibly interacted with? If you had a favorite one or several, why? If there were any that you disliked, why? And any observations or awareness of how social workers, clinicians, and or advocates interacted with your foster parents and ultimately your adoptive parents. And whenever you're ready. You can pick one, a few, or all.
I'll start. I can recall 2 social workers that I actually interacted with. I did not have a favorite one. No particular reason why not. Just, I think I was just very much in a confused sort of state most of the time. So I was never like trying to latch on to a social worker, or I never looked at them as like, oh my God, they're gonna like save the day. I just felt like it was more, that's their job. They had to figure out placement, etc. So I definitely didn't have a favorite. As far as I can recall, there were none that I disliked. And I didn't really have a lot of observations as far as how they interacted with the foster family or my adoptive parents.
Joshua or Serena?
These questions are challenging just because it's hard to answer. Because I just don't have any like significant or definite like memories about interacting with social workers. I mean, I'd say I interacted with maybe a few. Majority of my placements were in the Bay Area, so I'd imagine I stuck with like the same social worker over time. I mean, the observation part, yeah, I really just can't answer this one. It's just like, just this topic, and it's just, yeah, it's like a blur. Like, I don't know, as a youth, I don't think there's this significance. At least for me, there wasn't like a significant like person in this position that I remember, or the interactions. Almost feel like it was just like business as usual. Wasn't like, and nothing against them. I mean, they got a job to do and stuff like that, but I don't think they just in that capacity to really be able to like have this like relationship that like is memorable for me. I know I don't remember anything negative, at least. I mean, I understand the social worker position and what they need to do working in the field as an adult eventually. So I'm sure they just did their best. So I'll leave it at that.
Serena, if you have anything.
Yeah, I do just want to say before I answer these questions that this isn't how I view all social workers, or this isn't my feelings towards all social workers. This is just my experience with my particular social workers and the social workers that I interacted with growing up. I think I grew to have more awareness of, you know, the type of work that is put on social workers when I worked for the Department of Social Services, and had a better understanding of possibly, like, I was just able to kind of see where they were coming from, and I learned to not take everything so personal, like my experiences. But with that being said, I remember having about 4 social workers that were involved in my placements that I can remember. I do remember meeting other social workers when we would go to, like, I don't know, I would say like their office or like when we would go for visits and stuff, and other social workers would, you know, they'd let us know this social worker and that type of thing. I didn't really have any favorite social workers, honestly. I think that I had always felt like I couldn't really trust my social workers, just because the older I got and the more I realized that the things that were happening to me were basically not supposed to be happening to me, and that it fell on where I was being placed and how long I was being placed, and not really being able to speak up, and not feeling um, like cues weren't picked up, if that makes sense. I felt like I was really upset when I came out of foster care, because I realized I couldn't trust social workers, and I couldn't trust that it was like in their best interest because of a lot of the stuff that happened to me and my siblings and all that type of thing. Also, I kind of felt some type of way towards social workers because I was told that I could trust them and that I could confide in them. And the times that I would try to, it would kind of just fall on us. We would get moved to a new placement. We would have to deal with the repercussions of that. And even when I was coming out of foster care and was being reunified with my bio mother, there was a lot of things that were going on that weren't okay. And I had told my social worker my worries and my fears and how I didn't feel comfortable and safe about certain things. And instead of trying to understand me, I felt it was like she went and talked to my bio mother and they joked about kind of everything that I said and just said that I needed to be grateful that I was replaced with my bio mom and that type of thing. So I had big feelings, obviously, about a lot of stuff. And that's why I needed to say that little disclaimer in the beginning, because I don't view all social workers this way. I think that it's just kind of how it was and like what, time. I'm 27 now, so I feel like that times back then I know were different. And I think, I've talked to a lot of social workers. I know a lot of social workers. I was going to school to be a social worker. And so I know there are different things in place now to better help youth. And I think that that's why it's so important to have these type of panels because, we need to make sure that those things are not the way they are, because I felt like my social worker definitely could have been somebody that I could have confided in and trusted. And I think that situations wouldn't have gotten to where they were had I been able to have that trust with my social worker. But yeah, sorry, I said a lot, but I just felt like I needed to say all of that. So thank you for listening.
Yes, please. I think for Joshua and Alice, your answers speak millions, right? Like in my job now as an adult, I have friends who adopted through foster care. I have a family that had an interesting switch with a private placement that is now foster care. And they can tell me the exact number of social workers, like what was this, what was that, right? Like they track everything, but the individuals that are directly impacted are like, I don't know. And I also strongly believe that it's a safety technique, right? Like Joshua, you're like, my memories are not that great. In some way, that was a defense for you to block out what happened in those first couple of years of your life. I know we can't ever fully block out, but people who experience trauma, a lot of their memories from childhood and the time when that trauma was happening, their memories are just foggy because it was their defense mechanism to protect themselves. So even though you were like, I don't know how to answer this, to me, it still spoke volumes. That's not millions. It spoke volumes about what your experience was like and interacting with those professionals. So thank you. I felt like Serena actually answered this. And if either of you want to add, or if something came up, you can talk about when you felt like your best interest was being considered or acknowledged, or when you felt like nobody was listening to you or not considering what was best for you. I mean, I think everybody's goal is child-centered practices and child-centered work. And as Joshua and Alice both said, like, it's just their job. Like, it's just, and I know there are people that are just doing a job, and I know there are people that are coming to this work super dedicated and ready to hopefully impact at least one kid, if not several. So if either of you can think of an answer to any of these, we can stay here or we can move on. Especially because a few of you were older, right? And kids are wise. And when you were older, were there conversations about what is in the best interest for you? What do you need? Or was it all just the adults making the decisions for you?
So let's see, a moment or moments when you felt like your best interest was being considered or acknowledged. Definitely being adopted with my baby brother was great. So I felt like my best interest was being considered and my brother's best interest was being considered. Also, I did feel like there was a moment, prior to, like, I felt like I was able to have a choice in picking which adoptive family I wanted to be placed with, because I think there was, a couple of families at one time that had shown interest, something like that, and I was able to go and spend time with the both of them. But it was one of the social workers had asked me in a way of like, well, what do you want? And so I felt like I had some control, some power in that very moment, and I found that to be incredibly helpful for myself. A moment or moments when you felt like nobody was listening or not considering. Definitely not being placed with my siblings. Again, I don't know all the factors, but regardless.
You're older too?
That was not best for myself. And there was something else, but I'll come back. I'll let Joshua go.
I think the first one I think for me is like easy, just because the fact that I was with my sister pretty much the entire time, and even when I wasn't, I was still visiting her. She was still there. I could call her, I could ask about her and know how she was. And I think just the fact that for 8 years, and then being adopted with her, just that moment was when the best interest, knowing how significant being with my sister was, and probably whoever was involved in whatever, I would thank them for that, because I think that's probably like the biggest thing for me, is even in my adult life, being able to know that I have her to like lean on, and someone at least knows a little bit of what the past was, whether we talk about it or not. It's just definitely just it makes just life a lot better and so much I won't say easier, but when I do get to dark places, the fact that my sister's still present, and if I choose to talk to her or something, I literally know I have someone that's like, no, I get it, Josh, like 100%. It's not like I'm trying to explain it to one of my adopted siblings or my parents, because even then I talk to my parents and it's like my mom will listen, but she just doesn't know, and she acknowledges that. So that's easy right there. That's just the whole thing. Second one, I don't know. I think just the fact that I was in foster care for so long, I think is kind of my answer for that one. It's like it almost goes back to the top one. It's like it was probably, I was there for so long, but at the same time, it's probably so hard to try to like find an adoptive family to take 2 siblings. So they kind of like, my answers kind of play with one another, because I know how challenging that is. Parents want they want a son, or they want a daughter or a specific age. And it's like, oh, well, we got that daughter with the specific age, but we need to keep her with her brother. And then that, so yeah, tricky.
Serena, you mentioned that you were going to go to school to be a social worker. You worked within the field. Joshua, did you ever work within the field?
Did I?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I worked at a mental health agency for a while. So I worked with social workers, clinicians, were on my team. So I've got a bit of an understanding there.
And Alice, have you done any similar work along the lines of your experience?
No, I'm a clinical social worker, but no, I do not work in child welfare. It's just a little too much for me.
That's a fact.
Yes. I always, sorry, go ahead, Alice, and then Serena.
There was something that I wanted to add as far as what I felt like was not being considered as far as what was best for me, which I don't know if this is just a system issue, but definitely like my mental health and my emotional health, I feel like was never considered at all. It was never addressed. People weren't asking. If they were, it was very like superficial, vague sort of questions like, how are you? I mean, where I could just say, oh, I'm okay. So I felt like my entire experience in the child welfare system, my emotional health was just not a factor and not considered.
Thank you. Serena.
I was just agreeing with Alice, like it was a little too close for me. That's actually why I stepped out of social work. I still work with foster youth as much as I can. I've just always felt like that is my community. That is like who I feel most comfortable around. But it was definitely too close for me. I had to step back from being a social worker. I just realized all of the things I still needed to work through and what I needed to work on. And I couldn't like possibly involve myself with other foster youth and their placement when I wasn't stable and I have like had worked through everything I went through. Yeah, that was it.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, all three of us are adopted. The three of you spent time in foster care and were in some way still connected or dabbled in it or did something to, like Serena said, come back to the community that we knew. I know, Alice, you don't do it directly, but you went into social work. Alice has spoken on many panels for me as well. So as has Joshua and Serena. So coming back to it in some way, I just think also speaks volumes. Race, ethnicity, and culture. And then I believe after this one, I will pause for any questions that might be coming in. So if you've been jotting them down or you're ready to ask, you can send it into the chat box. But we have tons more to talk about. Okay. How many placements did you have where the foster parents shared your race and ethnicity? How many where they did not? Was your race acknowledged or spoken about while still in the foster care system? Looking back, can you remember how your race or ethnicity impacted your time? And if you could, what would you say to a current 7-year-old foster youth of color? I think it was Serena who said it was back then and things are different. I think things are different and also somehow still the same, right? There are still old systems that are being used from way back, and a lot more work is being done, but things are different, but also the same. So thinking about that, what you can remember, what are you comfortable sharing with in terms of race and ethnicity experiences?
I can go first since, yeah, but I honestly am pretty grateful that in the beginning of my foster care experience, I was placed with a lot of Spanish, at least Spanish speaking homes. I feel like it helped me kind of keep that. Spanish was actually my first language, so I'm still able to speak Spanish to this day. It really gave me a sense of who I am and what I have. I think when I was about 5 and 6 is when it got harder to place us into other homes. So we started to get placed with different ethnicities or races. Those were all kind of different based on like the home. I've went through, I feel like almost every religion. And that was kind of something that I felt like we didn't really have a say in. Like we just kind of dealt with it. Like we were grateful to have somewhere to be and somewhere to stay. So I didn't really question it at that time. My race was honestly not spoken. I knew I was some like form of like Latina something. I just honestly never really knew my true, like I never knew I was Mexican until I was actually coming out of foster care. So that was kind of hard. My social worker couldn't really tell me. I'm not really sure why that was, but yeah. Let me see. I think my race and ethnicity, I can say was impacted in foster care, just being placed with different like homes that weren't the same or that didn't look like me, because I feel like it made it more obvious when we were out in public, especially in schools and stuff. Like people automatically either knew that I was in foster care or adopted, so that was something that really stuck out, or yeah, for me specifically. And then What I would say to a current 7-year-old foster youth of color is to stay true to what they feel. And I know that it's harder because you want to trust that that information is given to you, that you have access to that information if you have questions, if you can ask about it, talk about it, like, but it's hard, and it's like sometimes you have to find that out and stay true to yourself and figure out what's best for yourself. I felt like we did a really good job of like speaking Spanish and continuing to speak Spanish to each other and to do that type of thing, even when we weren't allowed to. And that just kind of gave us strength through it. It's just kind of staying true to what we felt and how we felt, regardless of like the situations that we're in. So, yeah. I hope I answered it.
There's no wrong answer when it's your lived experience. Joshua or Alice?
I'll go. I remember one foster placement shared the same ethnicity very early. I almost feel like that might have been maybe one of my first placements, just because I know it was in San Francisco. There's that, and then I will include the group home. I mean, because everyone there was well, the kids were Black as well, and then some of our counselors in the group home shared the same ethnicity as well, which to be honest was pretty cool. That's probably one of the counselors, I mean, introduced me to what football was about and stuff. So and that really played a part moving forward in my life and just my type of work ethic. So that was pretty cool. Was it acknowledged, spoken about? I'm sure it was. And I feel like as a Black male in foster care, I feel like of course it was, maybe not in front of me. Me being a Black male, heavy set, a lot bigger growing up like that. I was aggressive, so I'm sure that was always whispered and stuff like that. I know, and then leading into the other one, being impactful. I'm pretty sure for one placement, which was a failed adoption, I think just being Black, a male, aggressive, bigger, it ultimately, they wanted my sister, not me, and it ultimately failed. When my sister found out, my sister was the one that found out, and we then worked together to get the hell out of there because my sister wasn't gonna be stuck there by herself. I vividly remember us discussing that. So I do feel like it for sure was an impact, especially probably being in schools and stuff like that too. I can't put like a certain detail on or like a certain experience that happened, but I do. I mean, as an adult, that stuff still affects me. So I can only imagine being in foster care, and like placements and parents having a choice of like, oh, do we still want him or this and that. So that last question, what would you say to a current 7-year-old foster youth of color? To be honest, I'll tell them to put their head down, find something they love, whether it be a sibling, whether it be a hobby, and just focus on something outside of just the system and let the chips fall. Because it's tough. I mean, I work with a young kid and it's like, 7-year-old, you don't have no control over anything. So try to find something you can have control over that's positive, whether it be a sport, art, something, and just put all your energy into that to make you happy. Because it's all you really can do. That's all you really got control of at that age. Just focus on something you love and make that be your favorite outlet when things are dark, when things are struggling, when you feel like just no one's listening or whatever. That's that.
Thank you, Joshua. Yeah, they have no control, but they have awareness. Alice, do you have anything that you want to add?
Yes, I do. So my foster family that I was with was also Black, and the other foster kids that they had were also Black. I was never in a placement where I wasn't in a same race placement and or adoption. Nope, I don't recall that my race was acknowledged or spoken about, or like that anything kind of came of that. And as far as if there was a time I can remember if it impacted me, not that I just can't remember. I just kind of want to go back to what Katie had said earlier. Childhood memories are very foggy for myself, besides like those big moments. And I just want to say thanks to Joshua for what he just shared as it relates to what he would tell us current 7-year-old foster youth. I feel like what I have to say to a 7-year-old is like layered. I would first start with like letting them know to just breathe. I think we hold a lot in our chest. It's just a lot of anxiety that obviously you don't know that you have, but letting them know to find a place where they feel comfortable, whether that's journaling. Same advice as Joshua, finding some sort of outlet where they can release all the feelings that they have kind of pent up. And I would just definitely encourage them not to give up. And yeah, find something that they like and stick to that, whether that be a sport, art, running. I mean, it doesn't matter. So I would try to figure out what they're into and work to kind of enhance that while also giving them some sort of techniques to work on their anxiety that they don't know that they have, but like mindfulness and things like that.
Thank you. So did the three of you, I mean, Joshua said counselor at the group home got him into football. Alice, I really appreciate what you said about breathing and mindfulness and stuff like that. Did anybody do that to you or provide that for you, social worker, foster parent, adoptive parent? I mean, I think I know the answer because Alice, you even said like my mental health was not acknowledged, but so did all three of you have to dig deep and find that within yourselves without adult support?
Yes, a lot of self-soothing, a lot of coping, just internally, and that still affects me today. I hold it all in. I figure it out myself. I'm very independent when it comes to that, not reaching out for help, not asking. You wouldn't know if there was a problem that I was having because I don't let people in on that because I feel like people have shown me that they don't really care. So, yeah.
Serena or Joshua? And it's okay if you don't have anything.
I agree with Alice. I think I would look to myself for self-soothing. It's the same thing. I also kind of struggle with it today, but at least I'm aware of it now. I do have to say I did have teachers that would look out for me, I would say. I think that's a huge reason why I was out of certain situations. They were also very aware of what I was interested in. So I did have teachers that would find out that I was either going to get adopted or move placements, and they would make me like little gift bags of like art supplies because they knew I liked to draw or use that outlet to kind of get away from things. So I did have teachers that were supportive to me growing up that I can remember.
Thank you. Joshua, anything you want to add?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. All right, we do have some questions that came in. Let me see. There are two that asked about court reports. So as adults or teenagers, did any of you get to read the court report from your adoption? Erica said, at adoptive placement, DCFS provides the adoptive parents with court papers and any additional info on birth family. They advise us to hold on to them until the child is old enough to understand, in quotations. I appreciate that. Is that something you all got to see now that you are older? Have you been able to see your court reports and or your file?
No, and thanks. That's a great question because I wish that I can. But no, that was never brought up. It was never offered. I don't know what, I mean, as a child, I didn't know what paperwork, quote unquote, that my adoptive family had. Obviously, now that I'm an adult, I'm sure they have a lot of paperwork. But that's also a touchy sort of topic when you're trying to go to your adoptive family and ask for that information. So that's a whole thing in and of itself, but it was definitely never offered up. And no, I've never seen it, but I wish that I can.
Serena or Joshua?
No, I wasn't even aware you could see like court reports and stuff like that. I mean, I've got documents, but I pretty much had to strong arm individuals into getting those. And that was more so not even court. That was more of like, yeah, I probably shouldn't even have those. Like from my therapist and stuff like that. So like court reports, no, from what I understood was files are sealed, and as adoptees, we're not able to get those. So talking about us being able to see stuff, to me, it's like, well, no, that's not true. I feel like I've always been at the understanding that when adoption is completed, everything before then is locked up in a vault in probably a white box with my name on it, and I'm not touching that thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. All three of you were adopted from foster care, and files are sealed. So it makes sense that you wouldn't see it. And just little off track side note, because I know all of these individuals personally, Joshua, when you just said it's in a white box with your name, I totally pictured Harry Potter, where the prophecies were in that room with their names. And I know Joshua is a big Harry Potter fan. I just totally imagined like your box in that big room of like, you know, where they keep all the prophecies or whatever for any Harry Potter fans on here. I just totally had that visual of like, there's like a foster care hall or chamber or something, right, where kids' files are kept and they can't go in there, especially if they were adopted and they've been sealed. So just for people that are sending questions in, these are great. There are some that are going to come up later. So if you're like, Katie skipped my question, it'll probably come up after that. From Diana Rodriguez, do you feel like, and we've talked about this a little bit, but also, do you feel like the therapists, social workers, or other service providers that you worked with had the tools to help you or the families that you were with? And I've heard this from friends that are like, this social worker was like 12. They didn't know what they were doing. And then they were like, then we got this social worker who knew everything. So, and that's from a parent perspective, but from your perspective of your time, do you feel like therapists, social workers, or other service providers that you worked with had the tools to help you or the families that you were with? Whoever would like to speak to that.
So I come from the perspective of like kind of what I've seen when I did work in the field for close to 2 years. It's like overworked, underpaid, just one thing after another. I mean, I know caseloads are absolutely insane for social workers. And it's like, I'd like to say they have the tools because I feel like there's so many people in the field. There's so many different trainings. But it's like this combination of like you said, there's people that are just getting into it after college or whatever, and then they're thrown to the wolves type of thing because they need them. They need the caseload, and then you got these experienced folks that have just as much caseload, but then they have all these years of having to like work and like try to do their best. So it's like exhaustion, and then like maybe being tired, maybe not going back to the basics, or forgetting a training that was invaluable, but the work happens afterwards. You're not really able to sit with the stuff. So it's like, it's tricky. Yeah, it's tricky.
Thank you. And keeping an eye on time, we have about an hour left and still tons more to talk about, but I do want to stick with one that somebody sent. How important was it, or would it have been for you, which I think Joshua touched upon as well, and it was a question I was going to think of asking, how important would it have been to have a worker or a team that had your same race and culture background? Which I think you've touched upon a little bit, but if there's anything else you wanted to elaborate on, please do.
I mean, I'll go. I think it would be, pretty important. And then again, I'm going back to my experience kind of working. I know when I worked, God, what is it? It's not that because I had a few kids that ethnicity, they were black boys, and it was like I didn't put more energy into them, but it was more of like I could partly see like myself. It was almost like I had the ability to kind of step back from the work and be like, okay, what might they need? And then kind of, and at the same time, remember like, okay, Josh, he's not you, but what might this boy need? And then kind of be able to kind of ask certain questions and kind of bring up topics within like meetings and be able to kind of guide conversations and discussions with like all the professional team in ways where we could maybe get to things that might be overlooked if I wasn't there. Yeah, I think there's some importance to it. I wouldn't say it's everything, but I would say like there can be more brought to the table when someone can connect with the children on a deeper level with that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Serena or Alice, anything to add? Otherwise, we will move on.
I'm actually okay. Thank you.
You're okay? Alice, you're good?
No, I mean, yeah, I just want to kind of piggyback off what Joshua said, because I do think it's incredible. It would have been important, or like it is important to see yourself reflected in the people who are trying to work on your behalf. I think that when you're removed from your family, like identity is the biggest thing that's kind of stripped from you once you're removed and then moved around and then trying to find a new home. So I think when race is a really huge thing, obviously in American culture around the globe. So not being able to see people who look like you also is just another added layer of you questioning your identity. Whereas I think when you're seeing people reflected, you're not questioning your race. You're not questioning that part of you culturally. So I do think it's incredibly important.
Actually, I do want to say something.
Yeah.
I guess I'm gonna say that yes, it does definitely help. I know I had my feelings about my social worker, but she was Latina, and that did help. You know, we were able to speak to her in Spanish, or we were able to do that. So I agree with Allison and Joshua that it is important for sure. I think it should be definitely first priority, because if, kind of like what Alice said, if there is no like other reflection or no other area that like youth are not seeing it, I think social worker is probably the most consistent thing. So I agree.
Thank you. Okay, moving into adoption. Some of these might be repetitive, so I'll scan through and let you know if we can skip, but all three of you were ultimately adopted. So adopted from the foster care system. Serena's story, if you didn't catch it in the beginning, and she'll elaborate a little more, Serena was actually reunified with her birth family who had to adopt her. And hopefully we'll get into some of that as well. How did your family talk about adoption, if at all? And was your adoption day acknowledged or celebrated? Would you have wanted it to be, or did you not want it to be celebrated? An adoption day is the going to the court, having everything be officially finalized. My experience with infant placement is infants are typically adopted within like full legal finalization adoption within 8 months to like 18 months. Foster youth, I know it's a little bit longer. You're older, and there's court party celebrations and stuff like that. So anything you want to talk about on that piece?
I mean, adoption was definitely talked about within the family. Aside from me and my sister, there was 2 other adopted siblings. So it's like, it's there, whether we like it or not. I think my mom did a pretty good job of trying to, I don't want to say normalize it or make it something that, kind of don't like that word, but something that's not secretive, I guess. Acknowledging it, making like, yes, that is how you came to this family type of thing. But yeah, she did her, yeah, I guess they did their best as making it as positive as it could be. The adoption day, I mean, yeah, it was celebrated. I remember going to the courthouse, and then like we went to dinner, we went to dinner up in San Francisco at I think the Rainforest Cafe, which was pretty dope because I actually like the outdoors or whatever. So it was kind of cool to have that type of vibe. But and then when like my homie from like middle school came, I'm sure my mom could probably find the picture. So when you ask like adoption day, like, are you saying like the day of or like year after year too?
Yeah, year after year.
Okay. So it was, yeah, it was celebrated the day of, but like afterwards, I think, I know the way I am, I'm sure my mom probably like asked me if that's something that I wanted to like acknowledge every year. And knowing me, I'm like, nah, mom, like I'm adopted. Like, let's keep it moving type of thing. Like, that's kind of how I've been with things that are like goals achieved. So it only makes sense that it was celebrated the day of. And then from there on, I'm sure my mom acknowledged it herself, but didn't make some whole big charade out of it. So, yeah.
Alice or Serena?
I'll go really quick. We actually don't talk about adoption in my family. We don't really talk about foster care either. We've kind of just like acted like it didn't happen. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Do you feel comfortable saying a little bit more about how you were adopted by your birth family? It's a pretty unique experience, but I wanted Serena on this panel because it's unique within the work and the world that Pact does, but I was wondering if it's unique also within like Children's Bureau, other foster agencies. Like, is it common to have a kid who comes into the system, reunification is not possible, so parental rights are terminated, and then eventually down the road, birth family is like, actually, we can do this now. which is why I wanted Serena, just in case it's something that some of you have come across. And if you feel comfortable, Serena, anything you want to share about that process?
Yeah, so you touched on it, but basically my mom got her rights taken away at 3, and when I was 3, and we lost complete contact with her or anybody in my family. It wasn't just my mom or my biological father that were like, we just lost complete contact with my family. Like, I didn't even know coming out of foster care that I had 3 older siblings. I didn't even know my mom was still alive. I didn't even know my dad was still alive. So when we were put onto a TV show, because they were trying really hard to get us all 4 adopted together, my mom happened to be watching the news that day, and by this point she actually got clean, had left my father and had went back to school and was working with women that were kind of facing domestic violence and were coming out of prison and jail and that type of thing. So she had gotten her life together, and so she got in contact with my social worker. And during this time, they were actually creating a bill to be able to, I guess, reinstate parental rights after a certain amount of years if the parent can prove that they are better. So we were actually the first family that that bill was used on, and that's how my mom was able to readopt us. With that being said, there were definitely a lot of things that came with that, and it was definitely very heavy, and it's hard to talk about because I think immediately a lot of people are quick to be like, wow, that's amazing, your mom did amazing, and she did, and she's amazing. I think though that oftentimes our story gets lost and our story gets forgotten, and all the things that we went through get forgotten. And we weren't really asked if it was okay to be readopted by my mom. We weren't really put through that process. It was almost like it was no questions asked, and I think that's also why I kind of have some feelings towards my social worker, because I did try to express some concerns I had during that time, because yes, this is my birth mother and, my birth family and everything. I did not know these people at all. Like, we did not know them. We knew nothing of them. So out of one day for someone to just pop up and then they tell us, oh, your mom is actually alive and here she is and she wants you back, and then to rush that process, I think it was more for the story of, a mom gets her 4 kids back after 12 years of being in foster care and gets her life clean. But, we're now the ones that kind of have to go through everything. And kind of like how I said before, we don't talk about adoption. We don't talk about foster care. It's kind of like, I got my life together, I got clean, and I got you guys back, and that's that, and let's move forward. So I am honestly the only one in my family that really talks about foster care, talks about my experience, and then our experience with my siblings. My mom definitely has big feelings about that. She often questions why I do that or why I need to go down that road. I've also learned that that's just because she has wounds, she has things that she's kind of going through, so I don't take it as personal anymore. But yeah, that's my my special case.
Thank you. Alice, I know your screen is off, but if you wanted to speak to either of these, or we can come back to you as well. Okay, we'll come back to Alice. And yes, I think to just give a little background, maybe a little bit, just from my experience of working with youth, both from foster care, adopted from foster care, or aged out, or youth like myself who were placed as infants and then adopted. It's all across the board, right? So I hear adoptees that are like, my adoption day is important. It's what I want to celebrate. We're doing it every year. And then I hear of adoptees that are like, hell no, like that's when, yes, my adoption was finalized, but that's when, like, to them, it feels like a massive second loss of their first family, right? Like they lost their first family within placement or removal. And then adoption day comes along and they're like, that's when it was like, like adoptive parents are like, oh, legally you're mine. And adoptees are like, legally I'm no longer my birth family's. So it's this push and pull of like, we want to celebrate, but there's also significant loss. and in my experience with working with youth who were adopted from foster care at an older age, they're a little bit more like, I don't know what they went through. I know it probably wasn't easy. So for them, it's a relief to have that adoption day or to be adopted. For infants, from infant placement, it's definitely different. And I've worked with, and Joshua and Serena have been there, counselors at Pact camp. A majority of them were adopted from infant placement. A handful of them were adopted from foster care, and then a handful of them are former foster youth that aged out. And there's always dialogue from the former foster youth that are like, yo, well, at least you were adopted. Like, I just went through the whole, like, rotted through the system and aged out, and at least you were adopted. And then adoptees are like, I don't want to be adopted. It's just this very interesting dialogue. So any other continuing learning and education you can do to hear from all the different experiences is really helpful. Alice, if you have anything.
Yes. Adoption was not talked about after I was adopted. When I see that question, I'm very much like, what does that even sound like? What is that? I wonder what that feels like if your family talks about adoption, because I don't have any experience with that. Adoption Day was acknowledged on the day that it became legal, but that was it. And I don't think, so I wouldn't have wanted it to be celebrated if everybody was only going to focus on like when I was adopted and everything after that. To me, it's like such a disservice. Adoption was quite frankly traumatic. So it's like, we can't acknowledge my adoption without acknowledging 0 to 8. You know what I mean? Like my life prior to being adopted. To just look at me, it was just like half lens, not as like not a full person if we're only going to acknowledge my adoption and everything after. So no, I would not have wanted it celebrated unless we were going to talk about me as a whole person and my life.
Thank you very much for that. I think a lot of adoptive parents fall into that. They're like, let's talk about when you joined our family, and totally erase the first family you came from or the years prior before you were in their family. Coming back to race, ethnicity, and culture, because as people of color, it cannot be ignored. It is our everyday experience. And these are in particular, or in specifically to adoption. Joshua might be the one that answers the most because Joshua was a transracial placement. But also within same race placements, was race talked about or not talked about in your adoptive family? Second one is more for Joshua, challenge of being a transracial adoptee and or strength. I think as an adult, can you reflect? I think we've answered that one. And then my last one, probably more for Joshua as well, but the other two could also answer. Do you think there should be transracial adoption? So if anyone wants to take the first one or any of the others.
I mean, I'll go. I mean, race was definitely talked about in my adoptive family. I think I go back to my mom a lot because even today, she was just very aware of me being a Black male, and just how I was going to be seen. I've never really went into depth on like where this came from or how but she was just very aware all the time. And I don't want to say it wasn't like directly talked about like, hey, we're going to sit down and talk to you about that. I think it happened just in conversation, and just was always acknowledged, whether it be with friends, with family. Was it helpful? Yes, but at the same time, I think I think it kind of plays into the second question. For me, I think there was this struggle of, for so long, being in a system, being moved around all the time and like this and that, having these like somewhat embedded of something, something was wrong with you. And that's why you always moved around, and adoptions failed and they didn't want you and this and that. And as much as it was talked about, I think because of the past, I kind of wanted to stay away. I wanted to fit in. I didn't want to continue to be this like thing that stood out. Like, for instance, even one thing for me was like, we would go out. My family was big, transracial. I mean, parents are white, tons of kids, me and my sister, super big, 7 of us, ridiculous. So it's just by nature, you're going to stand out. And it was just like, I would always stay away from my family. Say we were in the mall, family's walking on one side and I'm on the other side. Like, don't even want to be noticed. And so this thing of like knowing I'm different from my family, yet trying so hard to want to like fit in. It was like, again, it was just like this push and pull. My mom acknowledged, hey, Josh, you're biracial, you're Black. These are those things, but at the same time, I'm like, well, how can I fit in? Like, where do I fit in? I didn't even have like Black friends. Like I had, like, they were in my schools, but I was just like I don't even kind of relate to them. But then my family's like white, so I'm just like my mom would try to put me into like, there was this one club in middle school. She like sweared that she wanted me to be a part of it. I didn't go. I'm like, oh, like never went. I tried to in high school, even felt left out, like be there and just be like, okay, I know I'm Black, but I don't feel Black. Like, so how the heck do I like do this? It was always a challenge. And then go into things like, oh, bring your parents. Like, well, if I got to bring my parents, then I'm not going. Just a real struggle, like absolute struggle, plain and simple. We'll go to that last question. Do you think there should be transracial adoption? Whew. Yes, but parents got to understand, like they're just, if it's going to happen, these parents have to understand like the depths. And then at the same time, I say depths and I'm like, well, they're never going to understand. So then no, it's like, that's such a
Loaded question.
Yeah, it's just beyond. It's like, because you can't, like, you could train a kid, like at the end of the day, if transracial adoption is going to happen, I think, and I say this on all my panels, if it's going to happen, parents need to acknowledge that they can't be everything for that kid. And that's when mentors and other individuals, they have to let go of being everything. They need to understand that, hey, you've got to kind of step out of your comfort zone and bring in people that look like your kid and allow them to be part of molding this child. Mentors, coaches, the teachers, like, and it's easy for me to say, but at the same time, as I'm saying, I know it's not hard. I'm not saying, I know it's not easy, but that is what has to happen. You've got to create a village around this child. We all know the motto, like, and you know what? The transracial adoption, like, it means more than ever. Because I could go on forever, but these other two probably have some wisdom to share as well. So
Before I open it up to the other two, as the other fellow transracial adoptee, everything Joshua said, I agree with. The struggle, the struggle, the struggle. Different for me, race was never talked about in my family. It is still not. I'm 38 years old and my mom's white fragility is just too deep. And I'm like, I'm not holding this for you, because she just cries. So it was never talked about. I grew up in South Florida, so I saw a lot of people who look like me, but also my parents kept me from that. My dad wouldn't go to Miami because he didn't speak the language, my birth language. They never took me to Colombia because they were afraid that something or other was going to happen. And I thought Colombia was like 25 hours away from South Florida. It was literally a 3.5-hour plane flight when I actually went back, or like 4 hours. So their own fear, fragility, whatever we want to talk about, just deeply fell onto me. And I had no say until I got older. Constant challenge, just like Joshua at the mall, my brother and I, not biological brother, would just, all we have to do, I mean, Joshua knows, all we have to do is take one step forward and nobody connects us with them, right? If I'm holding their hands, yes, but all I have to do is just move to the side and nobody connects me with the two old white people to my right. And then I'll answer, do I think there should be transracial adoption from an adoptee perspective? Absolutely not. From an adoption professional perspective, if there has to be, similar to Joshua, there needs to be extensive training. Nobody should be approved by attending a half-day workshop. They should not live in racial isolation. And I could also go on forever, but being aware of time, I will pass to Serena or Alice, anything that you want to reflect on within your placements, because I know Serena had several, or race within your adoptive family when you were there.
So in my experience, race was talked about when I was adopted. It wasn't talked about in the context of my adoption because I was the same race adoptee. So it was just talked about, generally speaking, providing education to me, things like that, what's going on as far as like societal issues. So yes, it was talked about in that sense. And then do I think there should be transracial adoption? No. I feel pretty strongly about that. And it really comes back to the identity piece. Again, you're already ripping someone from their family. That is traumatic in and of itself. Then they're being adopted. That's traumatic in and of itself. The person is trying to find their identity within all of that, and then to not see people who look like you and have the same cultural experience as you, etc. It just is a whole other layer that I personally can't imagine, but that's why I would say no on transracial adoption.
And just to clarify for recording purposes, you are not a transracial adoptee, but you think there should not be transracial adoption.
Correct.
Thank you. Serena, anything you want to add?
I also agree that there should not be transracial adoption. I also feel like I know it's a little bit harder when it comes to like foster care and placements. I often think that foster care placements are like pre-adoption, so it's, the scenarios are very similar, and it definitely complicates things and makes things harder. So I also believe that there shouldn't be, what would that be, like transracial foster homes, placements, foster placements, I guess. Yeah, that's my say.
And also go ahead, Serena.
I also agree with Joshua. I think it's because I work so closely with Pact too, and I've seen it for like the last 6-7 years, how important it is for foster or adoptive parents to be educated. And there are families that still come to this camp and are taking these I don't know, they're doing all of these, what is it called? Like they're going through the trainings, they're going through everything, and they're still very clueless. So I think that definitely it's not like what you said, Katie, it's not like an hour-long training. Like you need to truly understand, and you really need to truly like commit to that. I think it's like ultimately it falls on us, it falls on the kids, it falls on youth, and it stays with us forever. We're the ones that have to carry that. We're the ones that have to go through that. Like, and I get that, but it's like if you can make it easier, if you can make it better, if you can lessen that, why not?
And also just to clarify, transracial adoption in this context is white parents with kids of color. Just because of time and I don't have much experience with it, we're not going to talk about parents of color with white youth. Because I did work with a youth in foster care. She was white and she was placed in a Black home. Our dialogue was around white parents with kids of color. Birth first family. And I know there was somebody who had a question similar that is going to fall into this category. And I know some of you touched upon it because you were in foster care and you talked about, I got to see them or I didn't. So some of this might be repetitive. But when you were in foster care, was anything ever mentioned or talked about with your birth first family? If you remember, Serena didn't even know they were still alive. This one was kind of in the intro as well. Did you know if there was a reunification plan for you? Do you remember any of your supervised visits with birth family? And then do either of you have a relationship with birth family today? I know there's a lot on this screen. What do you want the social workers and clinicians on this call and who will watch later to know about birth family? So anyone that you want to take, if you want to answer all, it's really up to you.
I'll go first. During foster care, no, not really. I'll pretty much say probably not at all. Reunification plan, no. Supervised visits, no. Relationship with birth family today, yes. My bio dad will call me probably like every other week, lives in Chicago. I had found him a few years back. So we're still building that relationship. I can tell the kind of person he is. The past is kind of hard to discuss. So I've spoke with like friends, and I just don't feel there's going to be much of a relationship created there. At least maybe what I want. Because all my relationships need depth, regardless of who you are. And then through doing like ancestry, I found aunt and uncles that are in the Bay Area. I haven't really reached, well, right before I was gonna maybe reach out and visit, COVID hit, so that just blew that up. But at the same time, I'm using that as an excuse because it's a struggle to recognize that there was people there, and am I ready to go there and see what comes up. What do you want social workers, clinicians to know about birth family? They exist. A family is more than one or two people. And they may have no clue that there was a child that goes into the foster care system. When I said I worked in the field, I worked at Seneca Family of Agencies, and the work I actually did was family finding and permanency, connectedness, and through that I realized that there's a lot that can be done to bring a birth family into a kid's life. What I noticed, it gets narrowed down to, well, those two parents are bad, so therefore everyone else is bad. So then there's no effort put into finding them, whether it be an auntie, an uncle. I can say that through the 2 years, I was able to reunite one of my kids with an aunt and uncle, and to see that happen was just incredible. To see them get together for his 18th birthday at our office and just have hugs, have food, take pictures. It made me realize like there's a lot that needs to be done in the field, specifically there. And without me, that would have never happened with just that one individual. And the fact that there's probably the only one even in that office doing the work, says a lot. So it's like, if I'm only one doing it here, then no one's doing it anywhere else, really. So yeah, I could go on forever, because literally, if I was to go back to the work, that's all I would do. Let's just say that.
All you would do is try to find birth family for a child.
And obviously I have to go more in depth of the work that I did to do that, because it's not even like, oh, find them to reunite them, like to adopt them or whatever. It's like, just I just know there's a family there and they get forgotten. And a lot of the foster care stuff could almost be prevented up in some situations. So yeah, that's probably for like a different, like, I could go on. Yeah.
And real quick, is your birth father the birth parent of color?
Yes. Yeah. Well, they're both there. Yeah, but he's a mixed one. So he's Jamaican and Swiss. So born in Jamaica. So he's got this significant, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I'll just quick piece about that. I'm working with a lot of adult adoptees who are trying to search. A lot of them are biracial, and they feel like all of their search support are pushing them to connect with the white side of their birth family, and they don't want that. And it's mostly white professionals that think they're helping. I'm working with a couple people right now who are like, all they want me to do is find the white side of my family. I don't need that. I was raised by white people. I need the people of color birth side of my family. That's where and this individual I'm thinking of is like 42 years old, not from foster care, but in reunification and trying to connect with the POC side of their family. Serena or Alice, anything on the screen?
I will say something on the last one, what I want social workers and clinicians to know about birth family. Personally, for me, I didn't know how important it was to know my older siblings, to know that I even had a birth family that was still alive. Like I said, I didn't really go through foster care. Like, it was almost like I couldn't have the thought of like, I wonder where my birth family is. Like, it just wasn't a thought that I really had, and that was very confusing for me as I was being reunited with my mother and also my siblings. But it was everything I didn't know I needed and everything I didn't know I wanted. And I just feel like it's very important, if possible, to gather and to hold as much information as possible, because I feel like it's so strongly my identity, and it's so strongly definitely could have helped me even to know and acknowledge that they were alive, or acknowledge that they're people, and acknowledge that I come from something more than foster care. I feel like it's so simple in my mind. I don't know if that's like really true, but I just think like any information, any like minor details, questions, anything I feel like would be nice to have in a case, like in a file or anything, just in case if, foster youth choose to ask questions or choose to talk about those things. Yeah.
Alice, anything?
Yeah, I agree with Serena. I think like maintaining as many connections as possible is definitely best for the child, for the foster youth. I want to go back to something Joshua said, which was, it's kind of off topic, but he said, all my relationships need depth. I felt that in my soul. Same way, like if there's no depth to it, it's not really a relationship for me. But I believe that there was a reunification plan for myself and my brother. I don't know what that looked like, or what the details of that were, but I do believe that was the case prior to rights being terminated. I do remember my supervised visits, a lot of them. So let's see. I do have a very complicated relationship with birth family today. Very complicated.
Do you want to elaborate a little bit on any of your supervised visits?
I mean, I just remember being at like the county building in a specific room. There were a lot of toys. And then my birth mom would be there. Sometimes my adult sister would be there, and she had just had a child, so her daughter would also be there. So yeah, I mean, I remember them as being like lively, interesting, confusing at times. So kind of a whole range of emotions and experiences. But yes, that's the best description I can give.
Thank you. Somebody had a question from earlier. What age would you think would be most appropriate to speak to the youth about their story and their birth family? I feel like Serena addressed that and saying like just anything I would have loved to have. And through my work within adoption, adoptive parents ask me the same thing. Like, what do we say? How do we say it? I think Joshua also said it perfectly. Like everybody just thinks, oh, they're all bad. And I can speak from my experience and from other adoptees, like we don't want to hear the bad stuff. You don't have to tell us the bad stuff. We just want anything. So if you are a foster parent or a caseworker that interacted with any of your youth's birth parents, they just want to know what their parent was wearing, right? Like, what does my parents' hair look like? What were they wearing? They don't need to know all of the substances they used. They don't need to know that it was a one-night stand or a sexual assault or something like that. And I feel like that's where a lot of adoptive parents and professionals go to, is like, we can't talk about them, they're bad people. We're not asking about that. We're asking about anything about their character, their personality, their look, their style, anything that you can tell us, or tell your youth. They latch onto that. It gives them a mirror if they don't have one. Like, I don't know anything about my birth family, but if I was told that my birth mother was also a really good dancer, I'd be like, yes, that's what I get from her. Because my parents have rhythm, but like they can't dance like I can. So I'm like, that's what I get from her. That's what I get from them. I don't need to know that she was 22 and ridiculously poor, which I do know, but like it's other things that we want to know, and that should be shared from the jump. Like you don't wait until they're 12 or 7, you share from the jump, and if and when they ask you, which hopefully they will. Alice, did you have something you wanted to add?
I did. As far as like what I want social workers and clinicians to know about birth family, I guess I would just say to treat them with dignity.
Thank you. So keeping an eye on time, because we have about just under 20 minutes, I'm skipping this question, pause, and I'm coming to this one. The panelists do know about this one. They don't know about the next one. This one they know about. After the murder of George Floyd, there have been calls to abolish and or reform certain and various systems and industries, including foster care and adoption. If you feel comfortable answering, do you believe foster care and or adoption should be abolished or reformed? What would you like to see changed?
I know when I worked in the field and then afterwards a little bit, I was able to step back and look at it. If I was able to, I would love for like foster care. I'll go with foster care first, is to be blown up and rebuilt. Because, and this is my view, is like, it's so old. Foster care is ancient. It has been around for so long, and to believe we can reform something of such, it's embedded. To me, I feel is very unrealistic, and is one reason why I got out of the field. Is like I literally was like, there's no like, and again, this is me. There's no hope for it to be changed in foster care, and I know that's aggressive, but it just keeps churning the way it's going to churn. You could go to trainings and you can do this and bring in new people to lead the department and whatever, but they're bringing their old ways from an old department to do this. And unfortunately, yes, the youth that are coming out of school might have a chance, but then again, it's like they're being taught these old ways in school and then going in, and it's like, it's terrible. The way I feel foster care is terrible. I wish it could, be blown up and rebuilt, because it's like, and it goes back to like how I feel is like, if we were truly able to like bring in like not only just professionals into these foster youth's work, but people like really influence. And that's why I go back to like the connectedness, like family finding aspect. There are people there that could be there at the end of the day, if the money stops flowing and the checks stop cashing, who's there for the kid in foster care? Like, really? Like, I know, like, all of you is like, no, I'm here for the kid or whatever. It's like, no, but if that check ain't coming in, you're gone. And unfortunately, and I don't want to take anything away from your guys' work. You guys are doing your best, but at the end of the day, we got to bring more people in that are going to be there at the end of the day without the money or whatever to try to help grow this kid if they're going to be in foster care for however long. And those are people that are close to them, family members that are never reached out to because they're not direct. Yeah. Blow it up, start again. Adoption, I mean, I think it's slowly being reformed. I mean, we all know, like, if you could talk 10, 20 years, it wasn't even talked about. So you can, now people are, it's talked about, it's not secretive. We've got Pact doing things. So I feel like when you put the two together, yeah, for sure, adoption has got to be reformed in some ways. And yeah, Pact is part of that, to be honest. Like, I'm not trying to like celebrate Pact or whatever, but real life, like, things they're trying to do, acknowledge like race and things of that sort, because we do know it's a lot of children of color being adopted by white people. And it's like, if that's the case, then we need to dive in and go into, well, what does that mean? What needs to happen and things of that sort. So, yeah.
Serena or Alice?
I'm for abolishing foster care. I think that we really need to kind of rebuild and re-understand what ultimately foster care is and who it falls on, and that is youth. I think earlier there was I actually saw somebody in the chat asking like kind of what would be better for adult, like former foster youth that are adults now. And I feel like that was a lot of the work that I was trying to be involved in when I worked for Department of Social Services, is understanding that yes, there are tons of caseloads, yes, there's a lot of work, but ultimately that falls on the child, that falls on the youth, that falls on like placements that could have been avoided, background checks that could have been done better, more supervised visitation, like more understanding. Like, there are so many things that I can think back on that could have helped me, but now I'm dealing with as an adult. And I feel like there needs to also be extended help for former foster youth. As far as services go, I know there's a lot of services that are provided, but a lot of them cut off after 21 and 24. And I feel like it needs to be extended. Like, there needs to be almost accountability from the state or from, that these are youth that have to go through this, that have to live through this, that have to understand this, that have to heal themselves. And in that, I also believe that foster care needs to be abolished, because we need to understand that it's not about solely replacing a child. It's about getting better services and care for birth families, helping the birth families, helping the birth mother get better services, get better help in the areas that they're struggling, housing. Like, I just think that if my mom would have gotten better services and better understanding on what it meant to take care of so many children, that she could have done it. I mean, she ended up doing it. Yeah, it took us 4 getting taken away and getting her rights taken away, but there's so many steps that could have been skipped, so much trauma that could have not been there had, she gotten the services that she needed, instead of paying other people to take care of us. She could have gotten that money to support herself, to get the help that she needed. So I strongly believe that foster care needs to be abolished. and reformed, but I guess like I think it needs to be abolished first, because if we continue to try to reform it, it's dated. Like I worked in the ombudsman office and there was files and paperwork from 2000, you know, like why are we having paperwork so outdated, and this is supposed to be like a location that foster youth can come to with complaints, concerns. I couldn't even get my own file through this office, so it's like things just need to be relooked and reevaluated. And yeah.
And before Alice goes, you each three can either nod or shake your head, but I believe you all were within the California foster care system, correct?
Yeah, but I actually went to Oklahoma for adoption that fell through, and then I think I went to Arizona. I'm not 100% sure, but mainly yes, in California.
Joshua, it was California. Yeah, and Alice, if you're ready.
All right. Yeah, I appreciate what Serena and Joshua said, because I agree. I think it should be abolished, both foster care and adoption. I think that a lot of the issues that end up plaguing the birth family stems from the society that we've created, the societal issues that come up, internalized racism. I mean, there's so many layers. So to just kind of chalk it up to that individual's problem, I think is just doing a disservice to showing that it's more of a societal problem. And I think more resources should be put into the birth family and the communities, you know, all the levels. So yes, I would abolish both.
Thank you. Yes, family preservation first. This next question, they did not know they were going to get. I'm going to put it on the screen and let you read. And I'm going to ask that all you do is give your answer. No explanation, no, just give your answer. And if anybody on this call was at NACAC in Vegas, July 2019, this question was asked and it has sat with me ever since. So I wanted to bring it to this panel. If you could give foster care or your experience in foster care a grade, A, B, C, D, or F, what would you give it? Just your answer, no explanation, please.
I would say F for failed. I believe I was strongly failed by the system.
Joshua or Alice?
A D.
And Alice.
At least they showed up.
A C.
Thank you. I'm just gonna let us all sit with that. I know we are super close on time. If there are any, from my panelists, any final thought, statement, last mic drop that you want to give, please give it now. And we might have a few minutes for questions, but I'm also a firm believer of just letting it sit and marinate with the people who are attending. So for any of my panelists, any final thought or statement, last mic drop, what did you forget to say but really want to say?
I think I'm just gonna leave it. I think I said it before, but like each and every one of you guys that are working with a foster youth, I want you guys to ask yourself the question for each of your kids. And I said it like right before this, like ask the question at the end of the day, if there's no money flowing, who's gonna be there for that child? And see who's there. And if it's nobody, you got to do better.
Serena or Alice?
I just have such a soft spot, but I do still want to thank everyone that showed up today and everyone that is showing up. I know it's hard work and it's hard, and I just appreciate everybody being here and taking the time to listen and just seeing insight into all of our experiences. I think I said enough, so thank you.
Alice.
My final thought would be, it kind of piggyback off what I said earlier, but really addressing the emotional needs of the child is crucial. When trauma is happening right before their eyes, I mean, we have to address that over and over and over again. Sit with the child. It's okay to be silent, like figure out whatever works for that particular child, but it needs to be addressed by the workers, by the foster family, by everybody involved.
Thank you. So for moving forward, and because I know this is being recorded, what can we do? What should we do if there are foster parents on here or other clinicians? Listen to adoptees like you just did for the last 2 hours. These are some podcasts you can check out. And I believe there have been a couple on adoptees on about foster care specifically. You can follow adoptees on social media. All of these are on Instagram. They also tend to have Facebook pages as well. Significant amount of them are transracial, and international, not necessarily from foster care, but you will see a lot of crossover and helpful information. And read books by adoptees, written and or recommended. It's just adopteereading.com, super simple to remember. And I know we have literally 4 minutes for any questions or any final thoughts. In the chat, I'm seeing, yes, I will go back to the podcast list real quick. Thank you for sharing stories. I will say, I know foster to adoption is not my experience, but I'm just honored that you all reached out to Pact to have us connect, and that I got to host this incredible panel who I knew were going to be incredible, which is why I reached out to these 3 in particular. They were my top choices. So I'm glad they all came through. I hope this has been helpful for everyone. And I mean, Michaela, unless otherwise, we still have 4 minutes if there are any final questions that are coming in. And meanwhile, I can click through these slides so people can also either screenshot and or jot down.
Yeah, while people have a chance to type a question, I just want to say again, thank you, all 3 of you, for being with us. I just see so much strength, and I'm just blown away by your strength and your vulnerability and willingness to be here with us and share your experiences. So it's something that we don't get to hear a lot working in the field, and I appreciate so much. It's just invaluable to us, so thank you.
And to my panelists, and I guess I should have acknowledged anybody who's on here that is also directly connected, is an adoptee, I know some of you, or is a former foster youth, just checking in with yourself, the breathing that Alice talked about. It might not hit you right now, what was shared, what you heard, what they each talked about. You could be fine, I'm okay, like Alice said, and then 3 days later, it's just bam, you suddenly remember what somebody said and the tears come or the anger or whatever. So my panelists specifically, and anybody else who listened that is directly connected, please take care of yourselves, and just find your self-care, find your people, do what you need to do. And yes, this was recorded. So if anybody hopped in late or needs to go back, this was recorded. I don't know if there's anything else with the last 2 minutes, but we are done on our end.
Katie, will we have access to the PowerPoint as well?
I can send it along if you'd like it.
Yeah, that'd be great. So again, after everyone's filled out the sign-in sheet, we'll send out this recording as well as the PowerPoint and the certificate of saying that you were here today. So just remember to do that. And then I'm just gonna leave this open for a few minutes. So if anyone has any last minute thoughts or resources, we can all have a chance to copy that down in the chat.
I just have a final thought. I just want to say thanks to Joshua and Serena for doing this with me. And I learned a lot.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thank you too.
I just want to say thank you to Katie and Alice and Joshua and Serena. This was very powerful, very meaningful, helpful, lots of takeaways, growing and learning for us. And thank you. And I actually will look forward to re-listening to the recording, because I feel like we can keep learning. And there may be things that I missed and want to reflect on more. And so just thank you very, very much.
Yeah.
And for all of our participants, our next part of this training series is going to be on June 15th, and that's going to be with Beth Hall, who's also from Pact. It'll be on anti-racist service provision for transracial adoptees. So I hope you can all join us for that. You'll be getting the link just like you did for this one.
To my panelists, again, thank you. And it's 12 o'clock, so you all can peace if you need to. And thank you, everybody, for joining us.